Fantastic. Great. So we are going to start out today's panel by asking our panelists to introduce themselves. We're just going to go down the line on what is on the slide there. So they're going to share where they work, what their role is, and what their organization's mission is. So we are going to go ahead and start with Mike. Hey, Mike, are you ready to go ahead and introduce yourself? Okay, no worries. I bet
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Mike.
There we go. Hi, Mike Kamer, Senior Director of Project Real and Chief Organizer for Nevada Nonprofit Network. My role is a little bit of everything at both organizations, primarily at Project Real, fundraising, program direction, marketing. Basically, if the executive director doesn't have to sign off on it directly, I'm responsible for dealing with it. And I'll toss it over to Bree.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. I'm Bree. I work with the Cupcake Girls, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager. My position is in charge of making sure that our community partnerships are shored up, making sure that we build and maintain any current new community partnerships or are building upon the ones that we have. Also maintaining our community events that we go to, like for networking. So our community relations team is in charge of that, but they report to me as well. And our database that we maintain for our community partners also is something that is under my supervision. And then we have our next person. I don't have the presentation up right now. There we go. Tara.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Narita. I'm the Community Outreach Manager at Immunize Nevada. I'm also the internship preceptor, so I specifically, with my outreach coordinator or outreach manager position, I work with our coalition partners to create events, organize events, get any kind of outreach out there about vaccines. And then as an internship preceptor, I help to kind of mold our new public health professionals in our internship program. And then Immunize Nevada's mission is that we're widely recognized as Nevada's trusted resource for immunizations and community health for all ages by fostering education and statewide collaboration. So we're not necessarily a vaccine clinic. We provide the education and advocacy for vaccines, and we provide that education on them. So it's a little different than your typical, like health clinic kind of thing. So with that, I'll pass it on to Miranda.
Hello, so I'm Miranda. I work with the Peace Corps, and I'm a recruiter for Utah and Nevada. And my role is to help people who are interested in joining the Peace Corps learn more about the organization and see if it's right fit for them. And what we do is serve in over 60 countries worldwide, and we work in 6 different sectors. So education, agriculture, environment, health, youth and development, and community economic development. And we are a government agency, and so we cover all the costs of the volunteer and only serve in countries that we've been invited to.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I think everybody can agree that we have a really varied panel today. So I'm really excited to have all of you here with us. And I'm sure this is going to be an awesome experience. So we will go ahead and move into the first section of questions, which are about your personal background. So we are trying to learn with these, what type of education and training did you need in order to get into your position? And then a little bit about your career trajectory. So how long you've been in the field and what your career path has looked like. So I will start with Bree on this one, and then you can send it to whoever you want next.
Perfect. And I also realized I totally missed the Cupcake Girls mission, so I'll kind of dovetail that in with what I'm talking about now. So at the Cupcake Girls, we provide resources and support to folks who are currently working or have worked in the adult industry, as well as aftercare for survivors of sex trafficking. We have a branch here in Las Vegas, and we also have one in Portland. And Portland has the most strip clubs per capita than anywhere else in the nation, which is a little known fact, but they have the little tiny boutique clubs. And so really our mission is just to spread the word, but also to care in a non-judgmental and confidential way for folks in the industry as well as survivors of sex trafficking. Type of education and training. For my position, a lot of event coordination was definitely required. Educational background definitely helped. I did go to UNLV, but I graduated from educational psychology department. So that's where I have my master's, but my undergrad was psychology, which helps a lot in this position. Although I don't usually directly deal with clients, we had a surge of incoming clients right now. The first 2 weeks of the pandemic, we saw a 300% increase in our organization's support requests for care. So I'm sure everyone knows in the nonprofit sector right now, things are really, really busy just because so many people are in need. So that's something that definitely has been helping me as of late. But career trajectory, I'm actually very, very new to nonprofit. I just started at the Cupcake Girls a year ago. But before that, I was at Zappos for 8 years. So I started on the phones there, very ground floor, and then worked my way up through their leadership path through customer service, then went into HR, benefits, employee relations, organizational development. So I have a lot of different background in a lot of different things, but just ended up wanting to join the nonprofit sector because I've always felt like helping in a way that was more outside of myself and giving back to the community was more conducive to what I felt like my purpose was. And I'll kick it to Mike.
Thank you, Bree. There we go. So where are we at? Education, training, great. So I had a philosophy degree at UNLV. If any of you ever had a class with Adam Carmer, he sent me off to make wine for a year. That was not satisfying. That led me to get my moving to California though, and I went to Cal State Long Beach where I got a master's in public administration. While I was doing that, I was also a member of AmeriCorps, and that all really worked together to just get me into the nonprofit sector for a career. It did help. I used to run a club while I was at UNLV, and I was director of promotions for ICE over on Harmon and Koval, and really learning how to connect with the community and engaging people and running street teams, which seems ridiculous, were really valuable tools in the nonprofit sector, especially in volunteer coordination. So I've been in this field since, I want to say 2009, and it's been long and it's involved a lot of investment to get where I am now, but it's also been very rewarding and very worth it. All the things you do and learn and develop along the way end up getting used later. I recommend everybody consider a nonprofit career. So I will pass it on to Tara. Did I do that right?
Thanks, Mike. So just a little background on me. I actually got my biomedical sciences degree. Yep. I got my biomedical sciences degree for my bachelor's at Northern Arizona University, and then with that, I was hoping to get into medical school. And then I decided that I liked more of the prevention thing, so that's why I decided to go to UNLV and get my master's in public health. And after that, because of all the connections that I made, that's how I landed my position at Immunize Nevada. I don't think you necessarily need the specific education that I had to get into our nonprofit specifically. A lot of my colleagues, I'm the only one of my colleagues that has a master's of public health. Although there are some that are pursuing it right now, I'm the only one with the established coming into it. So it's not something that we particular push into at least our field, but it does help when we're trying to take that approach on community health and need for vaccines in our community. I've been with Immunize Nevada for almost 3 years now, and I feel like, you know, I didn't have the experience before this, so it's kind of like a weird getting my master of public health and having GA-ship at UNLV that was able to help me get the career, the position that I'm in now. So I will pass it on to Miranda.
So I actually have a business degree from Brigham Young University here in Utah, and I've been working in nonprofit or government work since about 2012. I got an internship right out of college at a community marketing destination nonprofit that worked with our county, and I worked there for several years, and then went into the Peace Corps as a volunteer and focused on nonprofit and community development in our community economic development sector. And then when I came home from my 2-year service, I applied for a job with the agency, and that's how I got to where I am now. Most of the people in my position or with the agency are returned Peace Corps volunteers, but not everyone. And I would say it is a requirement to have a degree, but not necessarily a degree in nonprofit management or anything necessarily specific to a certain sector.
Awesome. Very cool. It's always really interesting to do these panels and hear people's very varied backgrounds and experiences. So I'm really excited that all of you joined us, and you'll be able to talk more about what you do. So we will move into the next section of questions. These are about the ever popular unexpected roles. So like Mike alluded to, and a lot of you alluded to, you wear a lot of hats in your positions. So we're interested in finding out what something is that's part of your role that you never thought that you would be doing. And then if you can touch on what your work has looked like in light of COVID-19 for either yourself or your organization. And we will start out this one with Mike.
Yeah, so it's funny. I had notes that weren't on the slide that kind of apply to this, and that if you have degrees, is it relevant to your current work? And both with COVID-19 and my job in general, yes. A philosophy degree teaches you the skills to treat everything like a puzzle and an argument, which can be exhausting for your friends if you're being social. But when you're looking at work problems, and especially when you're dealing with solving social issues or addressing social issues, I should say, you really need to learn to look at things from all angles, apply different perspectives, because you're dealing with clients, fundraisers, your board, your management, the public at large, public perception, the community you're trying to reach out to. So, and then on top of that, nonprofits, you're lucky when you have stable funding. And right now, I joined this sector at the start of the 2008 recession. So I've seen where we're headed, and I can tell you, like, the next 4 years are going to be rough for nonprofits in particular, because right now everybody's going to get a lot of funding, especially like domestic violence. They're going to be really well for, like, I would estimate the next 3 to 6 months. But then when state budgets start cutting and they start doing belt trimming, we're all going to be some of the first things on the chopping block. And if it follows the 2008 recession, which I don't see why it wouldn't, just because this is a health resulting economic crisis, it is still an economic crisis, and some behaviors are somewhat predictable, especially with politics and money. So regarding the stuff I never thought I'd be doing, it's really the all hats thing. When I was in AmeriCorps, I thought, oh, wow, this is cool. I have a lot of freedom to experiment and play in the sandbox. And as I spent more time in the nonprofit world, I just realized, no, we don't have a big budget, and everybody just needs to chip in and be ready to do more anyway. But it's really cool. There's a big conversation right now going on among nonprofit professionals, the non-management class and some of the managers, there's an online community called Nonprofit Happy Hour, and it's just like chats and memes and serious conversations. And they talk about pay equity in the nonprofit sector. You never want to be overcompensating your employees when that's money that could be going towards your clients, but also how do you reward employees and pay them appropriately when we have this extra weight where our work shapes the world. So getting a little off topic, sorry. What does my work look like in light of COVID-19? In a bit of a stretched way, like any other day. And that's where I'm getting to. It's all troubleshooting, it's all problem solving, it's all adjusting, it's all how do we do more with less. So at Project Real, we teach kids about the law, their rights, and how to use them. We provide field trips to the courthouse where they watch live criminal proceedings and speak with the judge. That's not going to be happening for the next school year. And that's 5,000 students that go towards grant requirements we have to meet. So right now I'm coming up with virtual field trips and I'm not a huge fan of the virtual stuff. So how am I really going to make this impactful? Where am I really going to not just, it's seeing something, but online instead of in person? Like, where's the real meat there? But that kind of problem solving, I'm doing that every day when I'm trying to figure out a new way to apply to a grant and word it a different way because we didn't get it last year. So how do I make our story more compelling? The constant troubleshooting and problem solving, if I look stressed, it's not. It's really invigorating and rewarding. And it's probably one of the coolest things you get to do by being in this industry. And I will pass it to Bree.
Thanks, Mike. I would definitely echo a lot of Mike's sentiments as far as something that's part of my role that I never thought I'd be doing because I end up having to dabble in a little bit of everything. We are a very small grassroots nonprofit. We're also privately funded, which, as Mike was saying, is probably going to be a hit coming up here soon. But we kind of have some plans in place for that with a project that we're working on to kind of self-sustain. And I could probably talk about that a little bit later. But I definitely didn't think I would be helping with like writing social media posts, writing for grants. Recently, I've had to take on a couple clients for myself. So usually I don't deal with clients one-on-one, and I more so deal with the community. But that is something that I've had to take on with our influx of clients that we've had, and just a lot more crisis situations. So everything is definitely more problem solving in the moment, but very similar to how it looks outside of COVID-19 as well. Just we've had to switch everything to a virtual platform. We did have a lot of face-to-face meetings with our clients or just with each other before, and now those have just turned into either Zoom or Google Hangouts. We do some team building, so we've had like lunch Zooms or game nights, things like that, where we have to do them virtually, but we've just had to get a lot more creative about how do we do things without having to be face-to-face, and realizing that it's not that big of an obstacle just because we do have the technology to be able to surmount that. And I'll pass it to Miranda.
Yes, so for us, COVID-19 has been a huge impact on our operations because we've had to evacuate our volunteers from countries. And so we had to do a full evacuation of over 7,000 volunteers. And just the logistics of that was a huge lift for the organization. But one cool thing about that is that the organization really made it work and did a great job getting everyone home before borders were shut and before there were real issues in transportation. I think that's something across the board with all like international development, international NGOs, just dealing with the logistics of getting people from one place to another when flights were being canceled and borders were being closed and everything was going virtual. And because we are responsible for the welfare of those volunteers, we couldn't just be like, okay, write it out in your country of service, because if we couldn't get them the medical or physical support they needed, it would have been a problem. So that is a big chunk of what COVID-19 has looked like for us. And for me personally, just transitioning from being able to meet with people one-on-one, go to universities and do presentations and do all the things I do in my normal day-to-day life, and figuring out how to do that on a computer and do it effectively on a computer has been like a daily challenge. Yeah. And then something that I do a lot that I didn't really expect to do in my position, and even in other nonprofits that I've worked in, it's budgeting. Like, you have to be good with money, especially if you are using grant money or donations, if you're doing fundraising. If you can't show where the money came from, what you did with it, and why it is valuable to your constituents, like, you're not going to be in business very long. Okay, and I will pass it to Tara.
So something that I'm just going to mirror off of what Bree and Mike were saying earlier, though, is that like a lot of the things that I didn't think I would be doing in my position is a lot of problem solving and trying to figure things out, and really just dabbling in every little bit of the organization. Immunize Nevada is only there's only 7 full-time staff members, so it is actually really difficult to, get to do a lot of the work with such a small group or a small staff. So we really rely on our volunteers to help us out with a lot of our outreach and everything. So that's something that I didn't think that I would be doing, is like trying to figure out all these problem solving. And that's really being tested right now during COVID-19 because, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we aren't a vaccine clinic. So a lot of people do come to us and they're like, hey, we need our vaccines. But since we don't provide vaccines, a lot of the education is in person or going out into the community and talking to them and educating about vaccines. But if we can't go out into the community physically, how do we actually do that? We've all gone virtual, of course, and we're all working from home now, but we've had to kind of switch our outreach efforts to become more online and more through social media. And so because of COVID-19, just a little backstory on immunizations, we've seen a decrease in the amount of pediatric well-check immunizations. They've decreased significantly. So one of our big tasks and a problem that we're trying to solve right now is like, how do we get our immunization rates up when people don't want to go into a doctor's office because they're afraid of COVID-19 and things like that. They don't want to go into a hospital. They don't want to take their kids to see a doctor. So it's like we want to be able to provide this information of why it's so important and to be able to provide the access to vaccines. But if people are kind of afraid to leave their homes, it's kind of like that. How do you, where's that happy medium, or where do you get them the resources that they need? So I think that's something that has been challenging as working for a nonprofit, is like we don't have the funding to be able to host all of these vaccine clinics all the time whenever we want to. So you have to really problem solve and try to figure out the best way to do things with a limited amount of budget, but also make a significant impact on the community.
Wow, those are all really incredible answers. I think one of the really cool things about the nonprofit industry is that all of us are really have background in doing more with less. And so kind of this time of how do we pivot and do things in this new space that's very unprecedented is kind of like the understory of what nonprofits have been doing kind of all along, but in a different way. So really interesting answers. So we will move into the next section. Ooh, there we go. Went too fast of our questions, which are all about professional development. So this is now thinking a little bit more for some of our students who might be in the room about potential work in the nonprofit field. So some effective strategies for those who might be interested in working in the nonprofit industry. And then if you have any recommendations on, networking or trade journals or things that folks should be doing in order to learn more in your field as well. And we will start with Tara on this one.
Yeah, so I think, I always tell my interns this, but the biggest strategy for me when you're seeking a position, I think a lot of it in public health specifically, is really to just get that experience. A lot of people come to our organization to to intern and to volunteer, and then they're like, oh, but why can't we just do a vaccine clinic all the time? It's like, because we don't have money. Sorry. So just having them to be able to experience what working in a nonprofit is like. We allow our volunteers to attend our community meetings. They help us to plan different events and things like that. So they're able to really see what it takes to run a nonprofit and to run our different programs. So I think being able, if you're looking into a field in nonprofit world or in public health, really just trying to volunteer and get the experience to not only add it to your resume, but also to just get that experience to see, is nonprofit world really where I want to be? Because it is really difficult, when the funding isn't there and sometimes the support isn't there. Vaccines aren't something that everyone wants to really discuss all the time. It is sometimes a controversial topic. So you have to really see if this is your passion and if this is what you want to pursue forward. And then some recommended trade journals, magazines, professional associations. Specifically for public health, I would say, at UNLV, they have the Student Public Health Association with the School of Public Health. That's a really good opportunity for you to get involved. The public health nonprofit world is really small. So if you know someone, especially at Las Vegas and in Nevada, so if you know one person in one nonprofit, you're going to know a lot of other people in another nonprofits. So by joining these organizations like the Student Organization or Nevada Public Health Association or the American Public Health Association, those are all different ways to get involved, at least in the public health field. I know I also joined the NPHY. I can't remember where it was like the Nevada Public Nonprofit for Health. I forgot what it was called. I should have probably researched this before this. But it's like for young professionals who are entering into the nonprofit world. And it was really helpful for me. I think you can just Google their name, unless one of the other panelists might know, but it's a nonprofit for young professionals in the nonprofit world. And it was really helpful for me to join that because as a young professional in the nonprofit world and having my first experience with nonprofit, I had no idea what to expect. So by joining that organization, I was able to get more information about like how are they operating and what are some challenges that they've encountered, and they've been really supportive with helping me as well. So we all kind of bounce ideas off of each other. So I will pass the next one on to Bree.
Thank you. Effective strategies for seeking a position in this field. I think really building the skills to lay the groundwork for any job in nonprofit is really helpful. So kind of like Lynn referred to earlier, being able to do more with less. I think although it was one of Zappo's core values, sometimes it wasn't necessarily the top priority. It was like being very lean when it came to money, when it came to operations. And so it was good for me to have been on teams that were very good at that, because that translated in being able to, run events without a big budget, or being able to delegate well and not having to have huge teams of volunteers focus on, a smaller task just because we have the people. So really looking at how you can operate lean and how you can build the skills to be able to function well in a nonprofit. So again, operating with little money, or just being resourceful or creative with the way that you do things, I think is very, very helpful to nonprofits, and they like to see that. And good leadership. If you're looking for either a management position or anywhere above that in nonprofit, you have to be able, especially if you run teams of volunteers, you have to be a great leader. And so building your servant leadership skills is huge, and making volunteers feel appreciated without, again, having to throw a bunch of money at them. How do you make volunteers feel appreciated and valued and seen, and minimize burnout with limited resources, I think is a huge way to build your skills there. Trade journals, I think Tara might have been referring to YNPN, which Mike heads up. Yes, so I attended one of their events and they are amazing. And Mike was really, really helpful. We had an open session, which was very nice. But just being able to be with folks who have a range of experience in all different kinds of nonprofits is really helpful, so that you can network and get ideas. But even I would say before graduating, or if you're even looking at being in the nonprofit sector, definitely volunteer for different organizations to get a feel for how they operate, and just network, just talk to people, go to events, and try to get a feel for the different types of people that work in different sectors or the different organizations that exist. That might help you out a lot. And I'll pass to Mike.
So yeah, I was like trying to get your attention, Tara. YNPN is Young Nonprofit Professional Network. NPHY is Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth. Also a great organization if you're looking for a volunteer opportunity, I'm sure. But YNPN is aiming to really craft the next generation of nonprofit professionals and leaders. So that organization, which I'm a board member of, I believe right now we're at 100 active members, which isn't a lot, but that's also a real great opportunity to stand out if you are one of those 100 members. They aim to do once a month events. Don't know what that's going to look like for the next year. We are currently doing weekly online chats at various times, so they work for everybody. But it's really an opportunity to connect with some of the leaders in the nonprofit sector. There are a lot of professional organizations, publications out there for various things and needs. And a lot of them, there are some great ones. Another one, if you want steady money in the nonprofit world, just go into fundraising and grant writing, in which case you're going to want to join, something about American Professional Fundraisers, APN. If anybody wants to jump in to correct me on what the acronym is, but the Association of Professional Fundraisers, I believe. So those kinds of organizations.
It's the Association for Fundraising Professionals, the AFP.
Thank you. Excellent organization. They teach you a certain set of like ethical and moral standards as a fundraising professional, which you do need. But then there's also organizations, especially when you graduate, you might start getting emails for like join. When I was an MPA member, there was something like Phi Kappa Kappa, and it was basically a glorified AAA card, and it was not going to help with job placement at all. So there are good opportunities and there are bad ones, and you really want to look around. Publications wise, at this point, a lot of it really is online. I think there's something to be said for joining online communities like the one I'd mentioned earlier, Nonprofit Happy Hour, where, and you want to be careful because the echo chamber is real. Nonprofit Happy Hour, for example, leans very like woke leftist, and that's not a complaint or a judgment, but they have a certain style and tone of conversation that crafts the conversations in a certain way. And it couldn't hurt to get views from all sides. And even going to some, I don't know, like, what would it be? RNC volunteers group or something, but just see how people in various nonprofit sectors with various views are looking and talking about things. There is that professional middle of the road line that most executive directors are going to want to play, especially when you're dealing with funders. But you've got room to develop, so certainly enjoy that. So on top of YNPN, Nevada Nonprofit Network is something I run on the side. It's very grassroots. That's actually Bree, where we met through our nerdy nonprofit nights. YNPN helped to start that. Another argument to join YNPN. Nevada Nonprofit Network, my aim with that, not incorporating, not fundraising, not doing memberships, but really to support and get nonprofits talking, communicating, and connecting with each other. As long as you've got your foot in the door and you're a volunteer somewhere, it would be great to have you join us when we do things. So for example, right now, I'm creating a tool where people can register their name, their job, and the organization they're at. So if I wanted to talk to every volunteer coordinator in town, I could search for volunteer coordination, pull up a list of 20 volunteer coordinators and be like, hey guys, I'm looking to get into this new volunteer project. Can you help me build it out and troubleshoot some ideas with me. So, and our community in Nevada, I think the interconnectedness of nonprofits is an ongoing project of development, but it is happening and it's exciting stuff. So with that, I will pass it off. And Miranda, does that leave you, I believe?
Yes. So with international nonprofit work, it is a little bit different because you can't, it's a little bit harder just to show up and intern or to volunteer. And a lot of times I see a lot of resumes come through where people are like, I have a lot of international experience. I spent 2 weeks building schools in Mexico for spring break. And those are great experiences, but they are not enough to qualify you usually for a position overseas. Um, and you don't have to intern overseas. Finding a good nonprofit or a good organization in your community and doing an internship with them is going to help qualify you to work with one of our programs or several of the other programs I know of. And then I can't speak enough about networking, going out and meeting people who are doing what you want to do and building those relationships, reaching out to people in organizations and doing informational interviews with them, getting face to face or developing a relationship any way you can. And then, I mean, just a little bit of a pitch for us. The Peace Corps is a really good way to get overseas, get some experience in a nonprofit for 2 years in a grassroots community, and then use that to leverage a way into an international nonprofit or USAID, State Department, the UN, all of those sort of things, Catholic Charities. I would say though, you can't overlook how big the networking is in international development, because once you're in that kind of brotherhood of it, people help each other. So I have been invited to multiple like happy hours with retired State Department, returned Peace Corps volunteers, returned USAID, and people just start talking about, oh, I know this position is open. Let me recommend you to a friend. And so getting into those rooms is going to be a huge way of getting into those positions. As far as trade journals, look at the Foreign Service Officer newsletter and magazine. That's a good one. Return Peace Corps Association has a really good newsletter that's worth getting signed up for. Yeah, that's where I would start.
Those are all really stellar pieces of feedback and advice. If anybody is, hunting to be a career coach, you all can definitely answer those questions on providing some career advice and support to our students. So nice job there. So I want to invite any of our participants to go ahead and start dropping some questions into the box if you have any for our panelists, because we are moving into our last slide of predetermined questions, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A to close out our time. But our last one, so some of you touched on some of these in your last answer, but just some final closing pieces of advice. So if you have any things that you wish you would have known before going into this, a mistake that you made, and if you had the opportunity to start over and do this again, would you do it? So any kind of closing pieces of advice or thoughts or this kind of stuff, and we'll give folks some time to drop their other questions in the box. Okay, so yes, there has been a call for contact information. So if you are willing, our panelists, if you'd be willing to drop your contact an email address in the box, that would be really helpful. I'll give you guys a second to do that and also think about some advice. And I think for this one, we'll start with Bree. So whenever you're ready, I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
All good. I think something I wish I would have known before going into nonprofit is, and specifically the org that I work for, is that there is a huge divide in funding when it comes to, or not even funding, but the way that people care about different causes. I think if you say, animals or cancer or, certain things, those will get funding more frequently or quicker, or people tend to care about them a lot more than they do, say, I think Tara has a perfect example of vaccines. it's not what one of my coworkers calls sexy philanthropy, right? So I think that's definitely one of the things that I didn't think about before starting this job, but I'm so passionate about the cause that the challenge of that doesn't matter as much to me. But I think I just wasn't prepared for having to be careful about how, we talk about our organization or how we pitch our organization. There are definitely some folks who we can just say out of the box, we serve sex workers, and people are like, yes, that's so cool. But if you say that to certain folks, they're like, whoa, what are you even doing? So I think there's the judgment and stigma associated with our client population, regardless of if they're survivors of sex trafficking, is something that we have to be mindful of when we're writing for grants or when we're talking to certain funders. And it's definitely something that we don't, especially when it comes to partnerships and things of that nature, we don't want to beg anyone, so to speak, to be on our side, because that defeats the purpose of why we do what we do. We don't want to win over anyone who doesn't believe in what we do. If you don't believe in what we do, then you can continue to give to whatever organization you give to. But I think that is probably the key thing for me, is I wasn't prepared for, I guess, how tough that part of it would be. One mistake you've made in your career, and what did you learn? I think a mistake I've made in my career so far, which is very short when it comes to nonprofit, is thinking I would be good at all of it. And that's not necessarily the case. You can't be good at everything. So just being gentle with yourself and giving yourself grace when there are certain parts of the job that you could either delegate to someone else or might be fitting for someone else, and just focus on your strengths. There's nothing wrong with building upon things that you're not that great at, but focusing on your strengths is a huge win. Like for me, that's why I'm in community engagement, because talking to people, networking, making an ask for fundraising, those are things that I'm strong at. So those are things that I should continue to do and to hone as skills, and even to build other leaders in that regard. And then if I could do it all over again, would you choose this path still? I would choose this path still, but I would have chosen it earlier. I definitely would have chosen it probably shortly after college, or maybe even while I was in college. But not to say I regret any of my path, because I think it set me up well, but I probably would have started sooner. And I'll go to Miranda if she's ready.
Yeah, so one thing that I wish I had known before I started in this field is definitely the importance of education. While doing job searching, you're going to see that a lot of positions that you feel like you would be interested in or that you want to be qualified for are looking for a master's degree. And so you need to kind of plan out the next 5 to 10 years of your life to figure out, if I want to do this, how am I going to fit in that educational component of it, as well as getting the work experience and making enough money to live my own life. So that is like the first thing. And then a mistake I made in my career, when I was in college, found an internship option. I was really excited about it because they paid, and it was not necessarily something I wanted. It was in the career track I was on, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. But I took it because they were going to pay me, and I hated it. And so at the beginning of your career, especially, and when you have a little bit more freedom to do like non-paid internships or to take something that may not pay as much to get the experience, do what you are passionate about and what you actually want to do. Don't take your first internship or your first job based solely on the money, because the money is only going to excite you for a little while, and then you're stuck in a position you don't actually want. And then as far as would I do it over again, I definitely would. I kind of took a weird path to get to where I'm at, but everything that I've done to get here has given me experience that has grown on top of the things I did before and has made me more successful in my next position. So I will pass it over to Mike.
I don't think Mike.
Okay.
Oh, you're good now, Mike? Okay.
Yeah, it was popping up and down. Sorry. So, okay. the wish I would have known before I joined. Mentoring is like having a mentor, having somebody that invests and supports you and helps you develop professionally is gargantuan. Especially, I can't stress this enough. The fact that the audience is, approaching graduation and just getting started in your careers, if you want to make sure your career is going to go as quickly as possible, find a mentor, find somebody that can keep their eye out for jobs for you, that can make those referrals for you. But it's not, oh, hey, I have this person in my network. That is an ongoing relationship, and they have to invest in it and you have to invest in it. But there are going to be 10 people applying to one position, and that's generous. It's going to be closer to 50 or 100, and I'm not trying to scare you. I just, again, post 2008, this is what it was, even in the nonprofit sector. If you can, there's a phrase about like hiding out in academia or hiding out in AmeriCorps even, which is what I did. Like it was taking an economic shelter. It provided a base level of income. You were still able to utilize some social services like food stamps to be able to get by and do some career development at the same time. It was an excellent path forward. I don't know if AmeriCorps is going to be a viable option in a pandemic era, but if we get the vaccines and you're able to be out in the community and AmeriCorps is funded, that was one of the things that was funded. And you also might be looking at a vaccine core program they are actively talking about now. That is a great way to get into the field, but you can't just let that position and that safety be like, oh, well, I'm working on my career, good. That mentoring aspect on top of it is going to be such a higher level of boost and insurance and career advancement. I forgot who was just saying about they took the job for the money, but there's something called cultural interviews at organizations, and they will do it to you, but you should also do it to them. And what that is looking at the organization culture. Is this an organization I want to work at? There are some nonprofits that are as corporate as working at, I don't know, like a paper company. Like it's not what you might imagine. And for some people, that's awesome. There are also some nonprofits where, hey, show up in flip-flops and shorts if it's not a day where we've got public coming in and you're good, just get the work done, or work from home a lot prior to pandemic. Each culture is going to have its own benefits and they're the right fit for it. And you don't just want, if you're really going to go into this career, and look, nonprofit work, I don't know if anyone's mentioned this yet, but it's 70 cents on the dollar compared to the private sector, on top of whatever gender gap you might be dealing with. So somebody making 100,000 in the private sector is making 70,000 in the nonprofit sector. And if you're making 70,000, you're already doing really well. It's not an industry or a career you go into to get rich. So there's a lot of considerations to take place, which that you should be doing. And that's also really why you want to know that the place you're working at, even if the mission is very aligned with your beliefs and your excitement, what's the work environment going to be like? You'll hear from some older generation managers talk about, oh, I don't want to work with millennials or zennials or Gen Zers because they all want to work from home and wear their t-shirts. But especially in the nonprofit world, there's a lot less pushback from that, and there's been a growing acceptance. So those problems are slowly going away from the managers that you'll run into. You'll find people that are going to invest in you, and that's really what matters. But if they invest in you, be ready to invest back in the cause and pay back what you're getting in return. So, was there anyone left? I'm so sorry. I tend to rant.
Yeah, Tara can.
Tara, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just going to mirror off what Bree was saying earlier is that, going into my position, something that I wish I had known was that not everyone is really as passionate about the thing you're passionate about. like she mentioned earlier, like we also say vaccines aren't sexy. It's not something that everyone wants to talk about. It's not something that everyone else is passionate about, but I am. So, you know, my first day of work and going out into the community, I had people complaining to me and talking to me about how they don't like vaccines, and I got like really heated, and I had to just step back and just understand that like this is, you know, this is something that I'm passionate about. So because I am, this is why I'm moving forward, and this is why I love working in the nonprofit sector, and this is why I love doing what I'm doing. It's because I care about the topic, and I want to educate that to the world and try to make a difference. And that kind of goes into the next point, is one mistake that I have made is thinking that I can change the world. Because working in the nonprofit and working in public health, I'm like, I can, as long as I just tell people about vaccines, everyone's going to get vaccinated. It's going to be great. All the vaccine rates are going to go up. And I thought I was going to be able to change the world. And I realized that very quickly that that is not the case. It's, you know, one success is better than no success at all. So if I can just change someone's mind, or if I can, you know, educate one person about vaccines and have them kind of think about it a little bit more, they don't have to actually get vaccinated, but if they can just think about it, then I've done my job. You know, like that is putting the thought or the push into it. So that's something that I learned, is just not everyone's going to believe the same thing that you do, and you know, you really can't change the world in one day or in one vaccine, I guess. And then if I could do it all over again, I definitely would. If there's anything that I would change, though, it was just to get more experience in public health and in the nonprofit world. I had no experience, like I said earlier. I was planning to go to med school, so I thought I was going to be working in hospitals. I wasn't expecting to work in nonprofit. I wasn't expecting to be in public health, but if I had just gotten a little more experience in different aspects when I was an undergrad, then I could have realized, like, you know, there are a lot of challenges in working in nonprofit, but there's also a lot of reward that comes out of it as well. So no changes, but just something that I wish I had done more so before getting into my career.
I think that is an awesome place for us to wrap up for today. I'm going to give the chat just another minute. So if anybody has any final questions for our panelists that they want to sneak in there before we wrap up. But again, I want to thank you all so much for your time and participating on today's panel. I think we can all agree that this information was really, really important and impactful. And thank you also for dropping your email addresses in there, because I'm sure that there will be some folks that choose to reach out to all of you and ask some additional questions and maybe participate in some networking groups. So I'm not seeing any questions being dropped in there, but if anybody does, feel free to reach out to the panelists directly for more information. And again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time from our panelists today, and we appreciate it. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having us, Lynn.